Either you say, I don't agree with you, but I see many people saying he's a traitor, he must have a stake in this, so they imply all kinds of motivations that John could have had before publishing this. And this is what we call mainly the fundamental attribution bias in psychology. That is, that I imply that it's personal, something with you, it has to do with you, if you behave in a certain way. For instance, if you come too late all the time.
Which I don't, by the way.
By the way,
Professor Schippers, may I ask you some questions?
Yes, of course. What do you want to know, Rico?
So this is part 3.
Yes.
Of what we did, and you're back home.
From Stanford, yes.
Yeah. So how was what happened after we talked, and how was the journey back, Michaéla?
Well, I cracked some ribs before I went home.
Oh, yeah,
so
we didn't talk about it.
Pretty painful.
We just talk about how we're going to do this conversation.
Yes.
But not about what happened.
I fell. The pavement is really uneven in the States, and I had a scooter with me, and so yeah. Almost the last day I was actually going to do a kickbox training, and then I fell really hard.
So you got what you asked for. You got bruised.
Yeah, not during the training.
No, not during the training. I noticed just around the time that you got back, John Ioannidis, the professor you've been working with over the last couple of weeks, has published. Preprint
no, it's a preprint. Yeah, it's not published yet.
A paper that got some uproar.
Yes.
What's that all about?
Yeah, it's actually he made a model. Maybe you should read out the title. That's maybe a good idea.
Global estimates of lives and life years saved by COVID-19 vaccinations during the 2020-2024 period by John Ioannidis et al. Yes. If I understand correctly, if you phrase it like this, Ioannidis is the main author.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, now I may be biased, but my reporting over the last couple of years primarily focused on damage inflicted by vaccines, not so much as life saved. So what's going on here?
Well, if you look at John Ioannidis himself, he published mainly about the measures, that they were really not good, that they did more harm than good. And for most people it's like one package of measures, but apparently John has a different take on this, that the measures were bad but the vaccines were pretty good. At least that's what I get from mainly also talking with him, but also what he's published. And he's now publishing basically a model, so it's not real world data, but it's a model that you feed with some data, and then you say, okay, if I have these and these assumptions, then it's life-saving. But then the assumptions have to be right. If they're right, then the outcome is right. If they're wrong, or one of them is wrong, then the outcome changes. So at least he is lower than some earlier estimates, where they say, I think 20 million people are saved. But now he's talking about life years. It's not about lives, but life years. So if you live longer, 2 years longer, then that's life years, and not lives.
I'm biased. In your work also, like poverty doubled, or hunger in the world doubled, as a result of government policies globally.
Yeah, poverty, everything. Most of the goals weren't met, like the SDGs are zero hunger.
So that's not the topic of this conversation, but if we focus on the measures, you would be talking about 1.5 meter distance. So that was the compromise in the Netherlands. We did 1.5 meters. Mouth masks and those measures. In retrospect, they didn't function preventing a virus the way that was claimed.
Yeah, it didn't work, and they were very harmful in general. And then you would say this is one package. You know, the government makes so many mistakes. The whole package of non-pharmaceutical interventions didn't work, but was very harmful. What about the solution, the so-called solution? So a lot of people that know about this topic, Professor Schippers, Professor Meesters, has been looking at the excess deaths resulting of vaccines. But this is not in that model. There's nothing about harms. There's only about life years saved. But it's not about, I don't want to discuss the paper as such. What I want to do, because Ronald Meester has already
written, a
Dutch professor, has already written a reply, and he also wrote him personally. We invited him on the podcast, so hopefully he will say yes. And what we will do, what I wanted to do is, what I see is like a dynamic going on. As a scientist, if you publish something that a group of people really like, so they say, okay, this is in line with my worldview, that the measures aren't really good, and then people are like, oh, I'm glad that you proved that. And then you write about something else. So in this case, John Ioannidis has been writing about the measures, that they're not good. We've been publishing together. And now he's writing about the vaccines, they may save lives. Yeah. And he comes up with a model which doesn't show it, but at least implies it. Yeah. Then people say, like, some of them are like Ronald, they write a reply to him and very politely go into the debate. But other people right away, even if they're scientists, say, A2 John, so implying that he's a traitor somehow.
But he was the hero because he confirmed my bias beforehand. And now,
I don't know if it's a bias, but
you
could be right. You could be right, but at least
but still, it's my personal opinion.
Your worldview. Let's
exactly.
say it that way.
Yeah.
And now you're saying the opposite of my worldview, or what I think, or what I've been reading about. And then he's either you say I don't agree with you, but I see many people saying he's a traitor. He must have a stake in this. So they imply all kinds of motivations that John could have had before publishing this. And this is what we call mainly the fundamental attribution bias in psychology. That is that I imply that it's personal, something with you, it has to do with you, if you behave in a certain way. For instance, if you come too late all the time.
Which I don't, by the way.
By the way, he's always in time. But if you would be, then I would say, okay, he's a person who is always late.
That's just him.
So that's Rico. And then I don't see that the bridge was open, he really had some bad issues, he had a fight at home, I don't hope so, but all kinds of things could have happened that could have delayed you. If it's me, then I can see that, of course.
If you're late.
If I'm late, on occasion, So I would blame circumstances, and if it's about you, I will blame you as a person. That's basically what happens.
Okay.
So, and I had a lot of people writing me personally, like, Michaéla, what happened to John? Well, I think John is still the same, but he just wrote a paper.
Well, rightfully so, that they would be mailing you. I mean, you've been working closely together over the last couple of weeks.
Yes, we've been working on several papers together. But still, they could write John as well, of course.
Yeah.
But,
exactly. Why aren't you talking to the person directly? That would be your response, maybe.
That's what I would say, yeah. And the only thing I can say, I personally don't think he has any mixed motivations, in the sense that he gets money, or because he has been a proponent of he's basically a meta scientist. He's a watchdog for scientific rigor, and that doesn't mean that he cannot make mistakes or can have conflicts of interest, but we've been writing about conflicts of interests that they shouldn't.
So when we see somebody else's behavior because it's him or her, we would say, well, that's just him or her. But and in this case, we're talking about Ioannidis, but it could be anyone, but just for an example, if he does something that's outside of your own worldview, as you call it, then it's still a personal attribution. We still don't do science, but we switch around to the negative.
Yes. Yeah, it's basically also cognitive dissonance, because we see John as a proponent for, I don't know, the government overreach. He's been writing about that, we've been writing about that, and now all of a sudden he writes something that we don't expect. We don't expect him to be positive about vaccines. And then he's in the middle. Basically, here is people saying all the measures were wrong, and also the measures afterward, like the solution to the problem that was created. And then here on the right, the government has been right or wrong, they did everything right, etc. And then all of a sudden he's in between, like in this abyss. He doesn't belong to either group anymore.
Yeah. Now, this whole thing started, Corona time and the measures and all of that, started based on mathematical models,
Yes,
not on real
yes,
life data.
Yes. And these have been shown to be off by a factor, I don't know, 20 sometimes.
Yeah,
I've been
exactly.
writing a paper about optimizing decision making around COVID-19, and then I looked at those original models, and I had to read it twice or three times, and I asked my co-author to check it because I couldn't believe these numbers were right because they were so far off reality. So this mathematical modeling is something that's very dangerous in a sense if it's being used to make actual world decisions.
Yeah, you have to use real life. I'm no scientist, so what do I know? But you have to use real life data. But by that token, who knows if the real life data is off or not?
Well, actually, there are also a lot of indications that political motivations also make sure that data, for instance, about harms are being taken out of the database. So we've heard a lot of these. We've gotten a lot of these signals. And of course, if you change the definition, so for instance, people who have been vaccinated for 14 days, they don't count as vaccinated. So if there's some harm, then you don't count it in the database because officially they're not vaccinated.
There you go.
And then you find this really nice, interesting finding that after vaccination, the unvaccinated die at a greater rate, and which was, I think, the Leiden professors who saw that, were looking at that data.
Now, I've never met Ioannidis, but I've read his work, and he would be the first one to agree with him making mistakes just like anybody else.
Yes, if you look at his website, he's even saying that he let's say, he says, and I love to be constantly reminded that I know next to nothing. So if you write him, you will probably not everyone at once, but if you write him and come up with good arguments, then you get an answer. Maybe it's not the answer you're hoping for, but he will usually answer.
Yeah. Okay, so in Dutch we have a saying that's called valse bescheidenheid is dubbele hoogmoed. I don't know how we're going to translate that, but he is one of the most quoted scientists ever.
Yes.
So being too humble and too modest, that also may not be.
When I was when I was visiting, I noticed that he's very humble. So he's waiting for everybody to be seated when we have lunch, and constantly repeating and thanking people in his talks that it's not all about him. So it's almost a little bit too humble sometimes. Okay,
so people are now responding emotionally. But you mentioned Ronald Meester, a Dutch professor. Probability theory is the most likely translation for that. His response was scientific.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, but if you look at LinkedIn, he posted it at LinkedIn, then you see people coming up with all kinds of answers, like he's about John, but also about general government interventions. Yeah. Like they killed so many cows already, and that doesn't have anything to do with that paper, but that is how people see everything on one. Okay,
so on the positive, this is science at work. This is real life example.
Yes.
And may the best arguments win.
Yes.
So what's next?
What's next?
We're going to talk to Ronald. Try to?
Yes. Yes, I'm calling with him this afternoon, so let's see. Hopefully he will...
So that's the fundamental attribution error. Mm-hmm. Did you experience it yourself as well? Oh, what's going on here?
All the time. Not in this case, actually, because...
but you do when I'm late, when the bridge is open.
When you're late. Basically, I think if you know a person well, then you have a more nuanced view, I would say. So that would be a moderator in my view. I don't know all the research about this attribution error. But I would say my hypothesis would be if you know this person very well, then you know it's not him as a person.
Did you say everything you wanted to say about the fundamental attribution error, Michaéla?
Yes. Thank you.